regional developments with the Iran-U.S. standoff high on the agenda in St. Petersburg. The Russia trip marks the final stop of a tour which included Pakistan and Oman. Araqchi says consultations in Pakistan focused on the conditions for a possible resumption of Iran-U.S. talks. He said any future negotiations must safeguard Iran's rights and national interest. Despite the lack of a clear timeline for negotiations, Pakistan's mediation efforts are continuing. Daniel Khan reports from Islamabad.
There's been a flurry of diplomatic activity here in Islamabad with no evidence of progress. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araqchi wrapped up his second visit to Pakistan in just a matter of days. During his time here, he held consultations with Pakistan's civilian and military leadership, delivering Tehran's formal response to U.S. proposals aimed at ending the conflict. Pakistani officials say Iran has clearly laid out its own proposals. However, no details have been made public. They say Iran has also outlined its reservations. The message from Tehran is that it remains open to diplomacy, but not under pressure. Issues like the U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports and broader security concerns remain major sticking points. Pakistan has been acting as the channel through which these messages are being exchanged. But the next step, direct engagement between the U.S. and Iran, still hasn't materialized. In fact, that process has taken a hit. A planned visit by senior U.S. envoys to Islamabad was called off by President Donald Trump, removing what could have been an opportunity to move talks forward. Officials say Pakistan will continue to keep the diplomatic track open, but with key disagreements unresolved, particularly over the Strait of Hormuz, sanctions and Iran's nuclear program, there's still no clear pathway to a second round of talks. For now, it's a case of active diplomacy with no breakthrough. Daniel Khan, CGTN, Islamabad.
U.S. President Donald Trump says Iran can pick up the phone if it wants to negotiate an end to the two-month war. He again stressed Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. Trump made the comments after Tehran said the U.S. should remove obstacles to a deal, including its blockade of Iran's ports. Walter Morris reports from Washington.
U.S. President Donald Trump says if Iran wants to negotiate, all they have to do is call. He delivered that message during an interview with Fox News Sunday morning, and it comes one day after he canceled the trip for his top diplomats. Sunday, Trump repeated many of the claims he made before he returned to Washington, D.C. for the White House Correspondents Association dinner. He told reporters that he would not send Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner to Pakistan because the trip is too long and too much work. Trump called off the trip shortly before they were scheduled to leave for Islamabad, and the decision came hours after Iran's top negotiator left Pakistan without making a significant breakthrough. And as Pakistani officials work to reestablish peace talks between the United States and Iran, U.S. foreign policy experts say it will take careful diplomacy to reestablish trust between the two countries.
What this requires is really tough diplomacy. There's no question that the United States has a credible threat of force, but the blockade really blockades ourselves as well as Iran. And the United States has to decide what it's willing to do to get back to these talks and really begin some true diplomacy. You can't do this in 20 hours in one day. This is a very complex negotiation. You have to do it with experts. You have to be ready to be in for a long haul.
This weekend, U.S. Central Command released new images of a Navy ship intercepting a vessel. The Strait of Hormuz is a key gateway for 20% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas. It's essentially been closed since the war began, leading to a global energy crisis. In response to the closure, Trump imposed a naval blockade on Iran's exports. Iranian military officials accused the U.S. of piracy and promised a powerful response from Iran's armed forces. Sunday, Iranian media released new video of two ships that were seized and taken into Iranian waters. Iran's Revolutionary Guard reportedly fired on 3 vessels in the Strait of Hormuz last week, and those attacks took place one day after Trump extended the ceasefire. Senior Iranian officials say they won't negotiate with the United States while the U.S. naval blockade is in place. Walter Moore, CGTN, Washington.
Iran's Tasnim news agency reports that Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei has ordered that the Strait of Hormuz must not return to its pre-war status. Khamenei also urged neighboring Gulf countries to make the correct judgment and remain vigilant. The maritime standoff between the U.S. and Iran continues. CNN reports that ship tracking data shows only 2 vessels passed through the Strait of Hormuz on Sunday. In a phone call, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and U.S. President Donald Trump discussed the issue. Iran has relayed its red lines to the U.S. through Pakistan, which includes its nuclear program and the Strait of Hormuz. There are mixed reports on the main focus of the progress of the Iran-U.S. negotiations. For more on this, we spoke to Zhang Chuchu, an associate professor at the School of International Relations and Public Affairs at Fudan University.
I think this all reflects that although there is partial progress on secondary issues such as both sides would like to have regional de-escalation, at the same time the two sides have been plagued by irreconcilable deadlocks on some core issues such as the Hormuz crisis, the nuclear capabilities and the frozen assets. Right now, a key reason for the current lack of progress in negotiations lies in the absence of room for compromise between the United States and Iran. As we can see, the United States increases its military presence around Iran. So Iran believes that it lacks leverage and sees issues such as uranium enrichment and the Strait of Hormuz as its last bargaining chips. Thus, they refuse to make a lot of concessions. And meanwhile, the United States attempting to force Iran to compromise through maximum pressure has also adopted a very hardline stance. So it seems very unlikely that the two sides will reach an agreement in the short term.
U.S. President Donald Trump says the suspect accused of trying to attack administration officials at a Washington dinner was a sick guy who had been flagged to law enforcement agencies by his family. Officials say the suspect fired a shotgun before he was tackled and arrested. Trump was rushed out of the room, which was packed with hundreds of journalists, lawmakers, and celebrities. Tony Waterman has more from Washington, D.C.
What's typically a night of jokes and celebration of the free press here in Washington turned into chaos and fear late on Saturday with shots ringing out at the annual White House Correspondents Association dinner. Todd Blanche, who is the acting U.S. Attorney General, says it appears that the suspected gunman was targeting members of the Trump administration. He gave no specifics on who exactly, but many top cabinet members were in attendance, including the vice president, the secretary of state, the secretary of defense, and the FBI director.
We're still looking to try to understand a motive. From our preliminary investigation, it does appear the suspect was targeting members of the administration. I don't want to go beyond that because we don't have specifics yet about particular members of the administration, except that we do understand that that was his goal and his target.
Blanche told Meet the Press on Sunday that President Trump was also likely a target. It is still very early on in this investigation, but if that is true, it would be the third time that the president has been the target of an assassination attempt. President Trump, in an interview with Fox News on Sunday, said that he and the First Lady are doing well. He said the suspect, who the media has identified as 31-year-old Cole Allen, left a manifesto in which he expressed anti-Christian views. CBS News has reported that Allen shared his manifesto with family members, one of whom alerted the authorities. The shooting, though, is raising a lot of questions about security at this event. There is this dramatic video of the suspect sprinting through a metal detector area. But to reach that point, he would have been required to pass through other levels of security. Officials saying that Allen was carrying 2 guns, weapons, Todd Blanche says, were purchased within the last couple of years. And according to Blanche, Allen traveled by train from Los Angeles to Chicago and then on to Washington before checking into the Washington Hilton Hotel where this dinner was being held. Investigators have been combing through the suspect's home in Torrance, California, which is not very far from Los Angeles. They've also been going through his electronic devices, talking to people who knew him as they search for a motive. Allen is expected to appear in federal court on Monday, and the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Jeanine Pirro, said that he is facing firearms and assault charges, although that is likely to go even higher if he was in fact targeting the president. The shooting, though, taking place right before Britain's King Charles III and Queen Camilla arrive in D.C. on Monday. Their security now under review, but President Trump in that Fox interview saying the king is still coming. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Washington.
And in Burundi, President Evariste Ndayishimiye has been named the ruling party's candidate for next year's presidential election. The decision came during a meeting of the party names, the National Council for the Defense of Democracy, Forces for the Defense of Democracy. The 57-year-old pledged to advance the party's vision, promising to strengthen the rule of law and promote sustainable development. Ndayishimiye came into power in June 2020 after the death of his predecessor, Pierre Nkurunziza. Under the 2018 Constitution, the president may serve up to 2 consecutive 7-year terms. Well, that is it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thanks for watching.
Holding guns. Word protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Excellency, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Mali confirms the death of its defense minister following a huge escalation in violence across the country over the weekend. World leaders and industry experts gather in Nairobi to chart Africa's future in healthcare. Young people reflect on South Africa's development 32 years after the country's first post-apartheid election. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Coming up in business, South Africa proposes tougher laws to monitor money flows. And in your sports news, we'll look back on what was an extraordinary day for Africa at yesterday's London Marathon. Once again, a very warm welcome to Africa Live. We begin in Mali, which is still reeling from a larger wave of coordinated insurgent attacks. 2 days of mourning have been declared following the death of the country's defense minister in a suicide attack at his residence near Bamako, highlighting the growing security challenges facing the nation. Meanwhile, the United Nations is calling for an international response and global attention to the Sahel security crisis. Here is CGTN's Joy Krugijuma with the details.
Last Saturday morning, Mali's defense minister, Lieutenant General Sadio Camara, became the latest high-profile victim in the ongoing battle against insurgents. According to the government spokesperson, a vehicle parked with explosives rammed into the minister's residence in Kati, triggering a firefight.
During intense fighting, he was wounded and then transported to the hospital, where he unfortunately succumbed to his injuries. The collapse of his residence caused additional casualties, including the deaths of worshippers at a nearby mosque.
As the country mourns, a sense of disbelief has spread both within Mali and beyond.
It's a sad novel. All of my country, we are in mourning right now, so it's not easy. So I will just pray God so that his soul rests in peace.
Al-Qaeda-linked insurgents and separatist rebels staged simultaneous assaults across multiple regions in Mali, including the capital Bamako and key northern towns such as Sevare and Gao. The attacks reflect a rising wave of violence in the Sahel region. Malian civilians, along with local and regional leaders, are calling for stronger cooperation to combat the growing threat of extremism and terrorism. In neighboring countries, including Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, there is a shared sense of concern and urgency in combating the growing insecurity.
Our Malian brothers need to agree to work with ECOWAS so we can fight together against this phenomenon. It's not just a problem for Mali, but for all of us.
The attacks are seen as a direct challenge to the stability of the military-led government in Mali, which has been struggling to quell the violence despite increased military operations.
All countries in the sub-region should come together to eradicate this scourge that is harming the region and harming Mali.
The United Nations, while condemning the attacks by insurgents in Mali, also highlighted the heightened need for collective action. The loss of the country's defense minister and the growing insecurity serve as a stark reminder of the ongoing instability in the wider Sahel region. Joy Kirukijuma, CGTN.
Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have seen substantial political and security transformations in the past 5 years. The trio left the regional economic community of West African states believing they were better off going it alone. Instead, they formed their own organization, the so-called Alliance of Sahel States, initially to combat insecurity issues. However, it's since evolved into something more than that. Let's take a look.
Between 2020 and 2023, Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger experienced military coups. They were driven primarily by anger over the ruling forces' failure to contain insurgencies amid security pacts with Western countries like France and the US. In August 2020, Mali's military staged a coup which overthrew President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. A year later, there was a second coup, and General Assimi Goïta was sworn in as Mali's interim president on June 7, 2021. Saturday's coordinated attacks by insurgents come months after the Al-Qaeda-linked Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, or JNIM, attempted a fuel blockade of the Malian capital Bamako, which authorities were able to derail. The government is also credited with implementing positive reforms in both the mining and military sectors. In 2022, neighboring Burkina Faso experienced 2 coups in 8 months. Captain Ibrahim Traoré led the second coup, citing security concerns. The interim president, who continues to enjoy popular support, has embarked on what he calls a war economy, aimed at improving the economy through agricultural projects and foreign policy shifts, among others. In Niger, a coup in 2023 brought General Abdurrahman Chiani to power. His administration has sought to transform the nation economically, politically and socially. The government says it has moved to assert national sovereignty and diversify the economy by seeking partners in sectors such as agricultural development. However, the three continue to face threats from terrorist groups like the Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, or JNIM, which has wider control in northern and central Mali and Burkina Faso, while the rival Islamic State Sahel province is dominant in the borderlands between Mali and Niger. With inroads made against terrorist attacks, the three Sahel countries vow to continue to work together to stop all terrorist activities in all of their countries. Wilkis Anyabwa, CGTN.
And from current affairs to a brief look into significant news in the world of sport. Kenyan long-distance runner Sebastian Sawe made history on Sunday as he became the first person to run a marathon in under 2 hours at a record-certified course. The 31-year-old finished the London course in 1 hour, 59 minutes and 30 seconds. This was a massive 65 seconds faster than the previous record of 2 hours and 35 seconds set by compatriot the late Kelvin Kiptum at the 2023 Chicago Marathon. Speaking after the 26-mile race, Sawe thanked the pacemakers, adding that the fine weather played a key factor. The Berlin Marathon champion, who collected his third World Marathon Majors title, says he now looks forward to a huge victory party back home.
I think I've made history today in London, and for the generation they have new now to run a record is possible, not hard. It's depending with the preparation you had and passion you had and the discipline you had. So for me, nothing is not possible. Everything is possible.
So will you have a party back home?
Yeah, always I will have celebrate, yeah.
And it was a day of records in London for Africans. Earlier, Ethiopia's Tigist Assefa broke her own women's only world record on her way to defending her title. The 29-year-old, a silver medalist at the Paris Olympics, pulled away from Kenyan pair Helen Obiri and Jocelyn Chepskoske down the home stretch to cross the finishing line in 2 hours, 15 minutes and 41 seconds. It bettered her mark from the previous year by 9 seconds. Now the Ethiopian star is also looking forward to celebrating with her family and her mother in particular.
I will celebrate with my beloved family whom I value the most. I will celebrate especially with my brave and beloved mother. It's a happy moment for her to be alive and to see her daughter reach this level. I'm very happy and I'm lucky for this. I will celebrate it with my family, my coaches and my friends. There are a lot of friends who worked alongside me. I also want to celebrate with my pacemakers. Once again, I'd like to thank God very much.
Well, we will have more on the record-breaking London Marathon in the sports segment later in this bulletin. Meanwhile, let's return to and revisit our top story. Mali is observing 2 days of mourning following the death of the country's defense minister in a suicide attack at his residence near Bamako, highlighting the growing security challenges facing the nation. Let's now get more on those developments from our correspondent, Mamadou Tapili. He's joining us live from Bamako. Mamadou, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. What is the very latest situation on the ground right now, and what more are we hearing on the killing of the Malian defense minister?
Today Malian residents are really on the shock. They remain really shocked about hearing the information concerning the death of the defense minister. Of course, yesterday, since this attack occurred in the Kati, the main garrison of the military leaders, people have seen in different videos that his house has been bombed and destroyed completely. So people were wondering where the defense minister was. If it was inside, it will be difficult for him to survive out of this bombing. But today, last night, the authority have announced this statement of his death, and the population really remains in shock, and the flags are half-mast. And people, out of that also, by trying to, and the government have decreed a mourning of 2 days, 48 hours mourning, and a curfew has been imposed for 72 hours, renewable if necessary. But out of that also, we have heard last night again the death of the minister of the head of the intelligence service of Mali, Mr. Modibo Kone. So, including all these informations, I think the Malian population are really in a big shock, and don't know what to do, and worried about the rest of the situation.
Well, big shock indeed. In the aftermath of these tragic incidents, is there any information about the president's whereabouts?
Yeah, that's the biggest worries of the Malian people, because no one knows till now where the president is. Some are saying that he's been exfiltrated and he will be somewhere in a shore place, to see how the evolving of the situation. But apart from that, what we have heard from the statement from the government last night at the national TV, where he said the chief of the army, the president Assimi Goïta, and all the governments are praying for the death of the prime minister. This word give an assurance to the population that he's secured, he's alive, and he's there. So people are waiting for the good moments, maybe to hear from him. But for the moment, no one knows what's really going on and where is exactly, and people are expecting to know more about that situation too, because at least we know that he's alive and he's secure, but we are expecting maybe a good time for him to pronounce himself or to talk to the Malian people.
On top of that, Mamadou, reports indicate that Malian troops and Russian mercenaries withdrew from the northern city of Kidal. What do we have on this? What do we know?
It's a very complicated situation, because these coordinated attacks have been occurred in different regions of the country, in Gao, in Kidal, in Sévaré, in the center, in Bamako. So there were many things that went up on Saturday. But the case of Kidal, which has been at the Kidal, after a couple of hours, in the daytime, the FLA, which is the Front of the Liberations of Azawad, they have released a statement in which they said that they have the control of the town of Kidal, while the Malian army also said no, Kidal is everything is in full control, the territory is in full control. So there were a big communication situation problem, communication fighting that was going on. And later on, we have heard that there's a push of resistance of a Malian army still in Kidal. And that's later on, the guys of the FLA said that they have been able to negotiate a corridor with the Russian in Kidal, so they can leave quite cute the town of Kidal. So at the moment, the access is very difficult in Kidal to tell exactly what's really going on. But one thing is clear, FLA is present in Kidal. The fight will still keep going, still yesterday. But today, it seems to be that Kidal, it seems to be in the hand of the FLA groups. But yeah, that's the situation that's going on. It's really confusion. There's a big confusion, a complicated situation. But we can end up saying that Kidal is getting in the hand of the rebellions of FLA, liberation of Azawad. They at least are maybe having the larger part of Kidal, because we can see them moving around the house of the governor. And
well, we apologize for that break in communication. We do get the sense of what Mamadou Tapili was trying to say. That was Mamadou Tapili reporting live from Bamako. Thanks for that. A World Health Summit for Africa has begun here in Nairobi. The high-level gathering has brought together policymakers, health experts, innovators, and global partners in an effort to shape the future of health systems across the continent. Organizers say the summit will focus on innovation and integrating health systems, strengthening primary health care, and expanding access through digital solutions. Delegates will be looking in particular at scalable solutions and how to foster cross-border collaboration for efficient, equitable, and sustainable health systems. What comes out of the summit can often guide policy, help attract investment, and strengthen partnership in the sector. Our reporter Daniel Arap Moy is covering the summit in Nairobi, and he joins us live from there. Daniel, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. Daniel, has the meeting begun, and who is in attendance?
Yes, Richard, the meeting has begun here at the United Nations complex in Gigiri, where over 2,000 delegates, that is according to the secretariat here at the complex, there are about 2,000 delegates who are attending this health summit. And we also have key among the people that are actually attending this summit, experts, innovators, and policymakers. But of course, we have health ministers from at least 50 African countries, and also finance ministers from at least 50 African countries. Now, well, there's a reason for having both finance ministers and health ministers in this particular meeting, because the question is about reimagining Africa's health, and that requires money, and money is appropriated by members of parliament through the Minister of Finance. So there are finance ministers here that are attending this summit to ensure that the goal that they have set up, reimagining Africa's health system, is achieved. So quite a number of people here, Richard, and in the next 3 days, they'll be discussing key issues that we will be looking at here. But earlier on, we did listen to President William Ruto, the Kenyan president, who addressed the opening ceremony together with the president of the summit, who also addressed the gathering here. And this is what President Ruto and the president had to say, the summit president rather had to say.
We are believers, and I dare say very strong believers, in multilateralism and collective action. This summit is anchored on a clear and urgent imperative. It calls on us to reimagine Africa's health systems through innovation, integration, and interdependence. It challenges us to design practical pathways that translate into better outcomes for health in our continent.
It's very significant for Africa in these times of a changing global health ecosystem to raise its voice, to show its strength, and to take initiative. We need to signal to Africa, to the many countries in Africa, but also to the entire world, that health is still a #1 priority, and it has to be addressed by any country in a way where the countries take sovereignty, but work together very intensively. And that's the main message from here.
Daniel, you talked about it initially in your earlier answer. Talk to us about those key issues that delegates are expected to address over the next 3 days. What are they?
Well, Richard, one of the main key issues to be addressed in this summit here in Gigiri, Richard, is the question of the health reach to the people down the grassroots. So what this summit is trying to address is that how do we reach out to the local people down the grassroots so that they're able to access health services, just like other people across the world? Because according to what we've had here, 50% of the people across Africa are unable to access medical services, especially those that are in hard-to-reach areas. So this meeting is trying to address that, and they're trying to address that using technology and innovation, that somebody can sit in a village, but they're able to access diagnostic using phones. So this is what the meeting is saying, that we need to make sure that all our people can access health services. Because you're saying here, Richard, that we can never develop if our population are sick. We can never have quality education if our people are sick. So this is what the meeting is saying, that we need to address this. But also another key challenge that they are trying to address is how do they marshal resources together? So the ministers of finance are here and the ministers of health are here to ensure that governments are able to speak in one voice. If they are to collect funds to support the health system, can they do it collectively? Can they speak with one collective voice to ensure that Africa is heard, and Africa is not just at the background this time? They want Africa to lead the cause. We are talking about diseases that are affecting the continent, and these are the areas that they want to invest in it as a continent, as a collective, not just as African Union, but as a collective, Richard.
All right, Daniel Arab Moy speaking to us right here in Nairobi. Thanks for that. South Africa is marking Freedom Day today, 32 years after its first post-apartheid elections. The election was the first in which South Africans of all races were allowed to vote. The government promotes the day as a celebration of democracy. But this year, young people are using it to draw attention to other issues. CGTN's Ulysses Njamela has more.
Mqondisi Myeni is a 32-year-old South African traditional leader, or Induna, from KwaZulu-Natal province. Born at the dawn of democracy in 1994, Myeni has thus far lived through the best times and some challenging times in South Africa.
Well, considering the change that we've experienced in this country, in South Africa, since the inception of democracy back in 1994, what we can point out is that we've seen things that have changed for the better, and we've seen changes that actually changed for the West. Maybe pointing out the first issue that actually changed for the good as the atrocities that we used to experience during the apartheid regime. We are no longer experiencing such in this country, and that's one of the good points that we can highlight when talking about change. During the 32 years of freedom in South Africa, because you can
is just over 31%.
One is the youth unemployment, or the unemployment in general, because it's not only youth that is facing unemployment. If you go back during the apartheid regime, we grew up with our fathers staying in Johannesburg, staying in Durban, staying in the cities, working, supporting their families. And for us right now, as the heads of the households, we are having it so hard to even support our families, because the level of unemployment in this country is way beyond even the imagination. We've never thought that the unemployment could reach these heights when we first received freedom, when we first received democracy. I don't even think that the context of democracy that was given to us in 1994 is what we are currently experiencing at this time.
But in Myeni's lived experience, there are also material things that have changed for the better.
Maybe what we can point out as something that has changed for the good is the access to basic services. For example, the free houses. We've been receiving free houses in South Africa. I'm not sure if there are any other countries in this world that are giving free houses to their citizens like South Africa does. We've seen people receiving social grant. We've seen people receiving the social relief grant that started, I think, after COVID-19, after that pandemic.
This year's Freedom Day arrives at a time when the country is facing major challenges. The day stands as a marker of democracy amid the realities of economic strain and global uncertainty. Yolisa Njambela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Time now for our business segment. Here are the headlines. Coming up in business, South Africa proposes tougher laws to manage money flows. And Egypt ends early closing hours policy imposed on businesses amid energy crisis caused by the Iran conflict. Well, welcome into the world of money. South Africa has proposed sweeping reforms of rules governing cash flow management. The move aims to bolster its position as a financial hub for Africa and attract more investor capital. The proposed changes include raising discretionary offshore allowances for individuals, regulating crypto assets, and easing capital flow restrictions. Under the proposals, asset managers would for the first time be allowed to run non-rand funds from a South African base. Current rules require such funds to be legally domiciled offshore, even when they are managed locally. The overhaul would also bring crypto assets formally into the exchange control framework, treating them for the first time as a distinct but regulated form of capital. Notably, crypto trading above a set threshold would be permitted only through a new class of regulated intermediaries with mandatory declarations of holdings and significant transactions to national treasury. Egypt has lifted the energy-saving measures it introduced last month to curb the effects of an energy crisis spurred by the war against Iran. Authorities say shops will no longer be required to shut at 11 p.m. local time. The government had previously restricted business operating hours following a severe shortage of fuel due to the disruption of shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. But authorities say other energy-saving measures, including remote work on Sundays, would remain in place. Ghana has launched a national artificial intelligence strategy which aims to transform its digital economy. The government says the move signals a major shift in how the country plans to use artificial intelligence to improve public services and support digital innovation. CGTN's Nabil Rafai reports from Accra.
A milestone in Ghana's digital innovation space. The launch of a national artificial intelligence strategy in Accra now paves way for the country to fully integrate the technology into Ghana's development agenda.
The strategy strongly recommends adopting a producer-led approach by establishing a natural language processing center of excellence to develop AI tools in our local Ghanaian languages.
Ghana has already started adopting AI in its healthcare system, education, and agriculture, and there are concerns that the technology could take over people's jobs.
We'll invest in upskilling and reskilling our public sector workforce and support workers across sectors to adapt and thrive in this new era. We do not intend to surrender our people to technological disruptions.
The government says it will invest $250 million to set up a world-class AI computing center and an additional $20 million for the implementation of the AI strategy.
As we implement this strategy, the government recognizes that strong legal and institutional frameworks must support our policy.
The government says it is working on a law to regulate the use of AI. Experts believe for Ghana's tech ecosystem, the national AI strategy could be a game changer.
it means there's a pure readiness to be aggressive in the adoption and, use case of AI solutions. So the plus side is, for people who are working on AI, if it is healthcare, agriculture, if it's transportation, now you know that government wants those solutions. Government is interested in implementing that.
The National Artificial Intelligence Strategy is expected to be implemented within a 10-year period. There is a clear push for Ghana to be at the forefront of digital innovation in Africa with this new National Artificial Intelligence Strategy. But experts say beyond the big vision, the real challenge will be in the execution. They want the government to strengthen partnerships with industry leaders to quickly turn the strategy into real opportunities to drive economic growth. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Global oil prices surged more than 1% on Monday as a second round of peace talks between the U.S. and Iran is yet to take off. This comes as shipments through the Strait of Hormuz remain limited, keeping the global oil supplies tight. Brent crude fixtures rose 1.3% to $106.68 a barrel by 04:53 GMT, retreating from early session gains over $2 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate was up 1% at $95.35 a barrel. Meanwhile, Goldman Sachs raised its oil price forecast for the fourth quarter to $90 a barrel for Brent crude and $83 for the WTI, citing reduced output from the Middle East. And to Algeria, where couscous remains the country's most enduring staple food, deeply rooted in its cultural identity. For centuries, it's been a daily meal in many Algerian homes. However, it's now becoming even more popular, largely due to modern demands for healthier and less expensive living. CGTN Sophia Shimachero reports.
Couscous has remained central to Algerian life, keeping families together while bridging tradition and modern life.
Couscous for us is not just any dish, it is the heart of the table. In our home, we eat it at least 3 times a week. It brings the family together around one plate. If couscous is missing from the table, you feel something is incomplete.
Once traditionally a communal centerpiece, couscous is now evolving into a versatile modern staple as many shift toward healthier and more sustainable diets.
Couscous combined with vegetables and animal or plant protein provides a nutritionally balanced meal. It has carbohydrates for energy, fiber for digestion, and protein for cell building. In this era of high prices and fast-paced life, Algerians are looking for a strong, solid and quick meal. Couscous meets all these needs.
Restaurant owners say that as they respond to evolving modern lifestyles, they still aim to preserve tradition.
Traditional couscous is completely different from instant couscous. We use natural semolina and steam it in the Couscous 3 times. This method preserves the nutrients and makes digestion easy. This is the secret of its survival on the Algerian table for centuries, especially at a time when people are looking for food that strengthens them without weighing them down.
And beyond its nutritional value, citizens also say it's a naturally budget-friendly meal.
Couscous fills the stomach with simple and available ingredients. Semolina is affordable. Vegetables are available in the market. And meat depends on what you can afford. It is an economical yet nutritious meal. And this is very important, especially in difficult economic circumstances.
So as global economic strain hits the region, couscous continues to survive on Algerian tables. A simple dish, rich and enduring. Sophia Shimachero, CGTN.
Time now for our sports segment. Here are the headlines. Well, coming up, we'll look back on what was an